Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Startup Impact Summit, a virtual conference focused on showcasing impact and creating impact. Today, on the international and GBA stage, we have welcomed an amazing panel who have years of experience across the Greater Bay Area. Without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Anthony to kickstart the panel on steps to scaling in the Greater Bay Area.
Thanks for that, Alex. Hi, everybody, and it's great to be here. I'm very happy to be moderating this panel today. I'm Anthony Lawrence. As Alex said, I am the founder of Greater Bay Insights, a consultancy that helps foreign investors understand what I believe to be the world's most dynamic and fastest growing regional economy, particularly as we come out of the coronavirus. I'm joined today by Andy Chan from Qupital. I hope I pronounced that right, Andy, and Oscar Ramos from Chinaccelerator. So welcome, guys. It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
Shall we just jump right into it? Andy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company first, and then I'll flick it over to Oscar.
So my name's Andy. I'm a co-founder of Qupital. What we do is we help cross-border e-commerce merchants in Hong Kong and mainland China with their exports, and we finance their exports through looking at their big data, whether it's from the e-commerce platforms, from logistics and the supply chain. So we are able to take that data, run it through our analysis, and then give them a credit limit and allow them to grow their companies, purchase more inventory, and help them with their working capital.
Yeah, the topic of today's seminar is scaling in the GBA. So I thought it'd be good for me just to give a backdrop first to what exactly the GBA is for those people tuning in who don't really know. The Greater Bay Area is a collection of 9 cities inside Guangdong province, plus the 2 special administrative regions of Hong Kong and Macau. And it's got a combined population of around 70 million, and that's on the official data. In other words, Chinese cities have official data, and then they have actual data, which includes their non-resident population. So 71 million is around there. That's around the official number. It's probably more likely more than 100 million when you add the non-resident workers. Oscar, I was just giving a backdrop to the GBA, but I didn't get a chance to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself and your company. Would you like to do that?
Yeah. So first of all, pleasure to be part of this panel. So, as Anthony was saying, my name is Oscar Ramos. I'm a partner in a VC fund called Sosb. We work around the world helping startups in early stage that are developing technology and solutions to solve problems. And particularly, I'm a managing director in one of the accelerators in the software ecosystem. So for us, GBA is a very strategic area where we're very active physically with one of our hardware accelerators based out of Shenzhen. And then for us, for chinaccelerator, we have invested in quite a few companies very successfully that are based out of Hong Kong.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, as I was saying, the GBA in the big picture is really just a collection of these cities in the 2 special administrative regions. But it's actually much more than that. I mean, it's been described as China's Silicon Valley. And there's a good reason for that. Because in actual fact, if you look at a map of Silicon Valley, the original one, and the Chinese Silicon Valley here around Guangdong, Hong Kong, and Macau, you can see remarkable overlaps. You've sometimes heard of, China's Silicon Valley used to describe Zhongguancun in Beijing and, Shanghai at times. But really, the closest actual match between these 2 areas and regions is really the Greater Bay Area. The more interesting thing about it that I've found myself, having looked at the GBA for now the last 15 years, back when it was called the Pearl River Delta, is that it has always been on the forefront of China's economic development trends. So it's obviously partly because of its openness to Hong Kong and Macau, the ideas that flow in through that, but it's also because it has the most natural cross-border traffic of any region in China. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that later. But just to set the backdrop here, I think there's some interesting numbers that we can throw about for the Greater Bay Area. The most obvious of which is its actual economic size. I don't have the latest numbers for 2019, but based on 2018 numbers, I believe that the Greater Bay Area is the world's 11th largest economy, just behind Canada, and it recently overtook South Korea. So it's quite astonishing, and that's at 1.6 trillion US dollars that it did last year. So, it's a big place, but more importantly is how it's growing. And this is where it's been fascinating lately to watch news media talking about new infrastructure investments coming out of China. And when you look at the numbers in Guangdong, you can see that they're actually quite astonishing. Hundreds of billions of renminbi going into new infrastructure. And what that means is really that it's going into the kind of technology infrastructure that's going to be used to give China its next incredible spurt of growth, coming through, autonomous cars, coming through 5G, Internet of Things, various other measures like that. And we've already seen the GBA get off to quite a head start on this with the growth of the 5G parks, that they've set up 10 special industrial parks around Guangdong now that are going to be testing and using and developing products based on 5G platforms. So there's quite a lot of interesting stuff going on in that space. But I think the really big future that we're looking at here for the GBA is in the financial space. And this is something that I know, Andy will probably talk a bit more about in some detail in a minute. But it's really incredible to watch the developments that are coming out in this. We've just had the so-called Wealth Connect announced, whereby people in Guangdong can now buy wealth management products, coming out of Hong Kong, and vice versa. But it's really in the space for new listings and new financing of technology companies that I think we're going to see this region really boom and really take off in the coming years. I'm particularly interested in a initiative that's underway. I don't know if you guys know much about this, but there's a big blockchain initiative that's underway in Guangdong province to essentially put the entire province's corporate sector onto a trade platform, a accounts receivable and accounts payable blockchain platform, which can then allow them to get better financing, not only from the banks, but from any financial investor coming into the region. So there's some incredible stuff going on there. But where I think we'd like to get focused now is to jump into some questions that perhaps you guys would be able to chip in on and help me and help our readers, our viewers rather, understand a bit better. I think for the purposes of this discussion, we're obviously going to keep it focused on startups and the startup ecosystem in the Greater Bay Area. So the most obvious way to start with this, I guess, is we have to address the elephant in the room, which is the COVID-19 outbreak and the incredible impact that it's had, not only here, but all around the world. So I want to start with you, Andy, and just say, from your perspective, how do you see the effect of COVID-19 in the Greater Bay Area, and certainly in the ecosystem that you guys are operating in?
COVID-19 has affected many industries, many sectors, and the economic conditions now are not the most favorable for a startup to scale, and so. On another side of the coin is the fundraising side. A lot of investors are more conservative during these times and are unable to, visit different regions and different cities due to the lockdown. So it's hard for them to do physical due diligence. So a lot of deals are moving a lot slower than previously before the outbreak. So I would say that things during the last 6 months have been moving slowly and not as an ideal environment for startups to scale. But now it's more in a mode where startups are looking more to with the storm and look for the light at the end of the tunnel once the outbreak is more under control in different regions of the world.
Yeah. Do you think that that's primarily just because people are feeling, obviously conservative, right, about their financial outlook? Or do you think that this is really just because we haven't been able to physically move around and people haven't been able to go and, look other people in the eye before they get deals done? What's your sense?
I think it's a bit of both. And then for businesses involved in either international markets or travel or hospitality, I think those are more directly influenced as well. Even though the COVID situation in mainland China and Hong Kong has been better, has a better recent performance in the recent months. Still, internationally, it's still a very negative consumer confidence and level.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my sense is that we're probably tomorrow, I think, going to hear about the gradual opening of the border from the Hong Kong side. In Macau, they've already been experimenting with quotas of allowing people to skip the quarantine on the Guangdong side when they go across. And I think we'll get something like that coming out of Hong Kong tomorrow as well. So we should start to get people moving again. I believe that probably, over the course of July, we'll start seeing those numbers, gradually float upwards. But I don't think until August are we really going to start seeing serious numbers coming in from Guangdong into Hong Kong, that's for sure. So are you anticipating things staying a bit flat for probably the rest of the summer, or do you think that there could be some upside surprise?
If we look at the tourism numbers and the number of visitors in Hong Kong from a year-on-year basis, it's dropped tremendously. So there been some improvements, but we don't see it much improvement in terms of a year-on-year basis.
Yeah, we have to look a bit further out. I think this is going to be a more gradual recovery than people are perhaps hoping for. Yeah. Oscar, what do you feel? Have you got a sense of how badly COVID has slowed everything down, and how soon do you think we could start seeing some activity picking up in a meaningful way?
Well, I mean, we actually have seen a lot of activity going on during COVID. I think what everybody is expecting is that things are going back to normal, and what everybody was expecting is that everything was going to go back to normal, and that's not going to happen. Things are going to change, and things are going to change in a way where even if something will go back to a normal volume, the players that are going to be taking care of serving those services or those products are going to change. And that is a massive opportunity for startups. We're seeing quite a few of our startups from Hong Kong that have been doing growing phenomenal. They've been their business has been expanding dramatically, and obviously they did that because there was a massive demand. People needed to have a service, and the way that they were going to do things was going to change. Then, looking into most of our companies in the region, most of them are actually very international. On the Shenzhen side, you have a lot of companies that are hardware that tend to have a global market. In Hong Kong, you're talking about a market that is small. So I mean, obviously coming to mainland China or expanding to other parts of the world is a very natural expansion where you already need to consider changing currency, changing regulations, licenses, etc. So in general, a lot of the companies are very open to internationalization. And when you are a startup and you want to run business across multiple jurisdictions, multiple regions, you already have in your DNA the capacity to work without having physical presence. And that has been instrumental for a lot of these companies to be able to absorb. Like SnapAsk, one of our education technology companies based out of Shenzhen, in the first quarter of the year, they already surpassed the whole volume of revenue that they had in 2019. Another company, VACT, also based out of Hong Kong, that work on security for construction sites, they already have matched this year the whole target that they have in terms of revenue, and it's only half of the year. And part of this revenue is coming from where they are based, but some of this revenue is coming from other markets. We have countless numbers of companies that, having already the background and the infrastructure for internationalization, if they have the right service, if they are serving the right industries, they are expanding their business. Of course, this is also having impact in certain traditional industries, but there are also companies that are suffering the situation. Miro is another one of our companies based out of Hong Kong that they help track runners in marathons, and as global outdoor events are limited, this company is having to reinvent themselves and looking for a new way to do things. But I have a lot of examples of companies that were able to recover from that, just based on the region.
Interesting, right? Really, yeah. I mean, clear winners and laggards in the situation. Would you say that there's particular space or particular area of the tech scene where you expect to see change coming most quickly as we get out of this?
Well, I think education is already something that everybody agrees that is going to change. The digitalization of operations of organizations has accelerated dramatically. A lot of companies that had plans to change the way they operate, they were forced to do it faster, and those that did it, they were able to benefit from business continuity in this space. So those are areas that are changing. I think there's also certain areas of e-commerce that in the past a lot of people was a bit more conservative in terms of moving to purchase fresh food or groceries or certain types of ingredients, and now they realize that is possible. So there's a lot of people that's going to go back to the traditional channels. That's no doubt. But there's also others that in the past they thought that was not an option, and now they will use it. I think in general, consumption habits and the acceleration of the adoption of certain technology is going to be a massive change across multiple industries.
Yeah, I hear you. Short term, looking at those kind of virtual businesses seem to have a lot greater potential than a traditional, physical goods moving kind of business. Looking a bit further out, though, what do you think the potential is for the 5G and the Internet of Things area? I mean, do you look at companies that are involved in that? These 5G parks are quite fascinating to me, in that some of them are anchored by very what you would think are old school companies like GBA, the aircon manufacturer from Zhuhai, and others like that. How do you see that space playing out in the coming years?
Well, it's obviously going to be a big change, because what I think sometimes people don't understand is that the big revolution of 5G is that it's the first generation of communications that is designed first for machines. Right. And that's a massive change. Where there's a lot of things that in the past generations were not possible. I'm very close to the industry. I started my career in the telco industry, working on the design of the technology behind 3G. So like 3 generations below. And back in the day, 3G was a new generation because there was an IP, like an IP core in the network. So here, this is obviously going to have a massive change in terms of how everything connects. No? So having machine companies like GRI or traditional manufacturers of equipment being involved is a very, very natural decision for them, because that can everything is going to be connected. And one of the largest enablers of that connection in a seamless way is going to be 5G. Basically, anything will be able to have a connection. Today, just the density of connections will not be supported. So we are also seeing companies in the space in our portfolio that are in the Greater Bay Area that are already working on projects. Most of them are still not really using the full potential of the technology, but those are companies that already have a service in place that will be accelerated thanks to some of the technology infrastructure is going to be possible thanks to 5G. More control on quality of network, discrimination of traffic, so you can make sure that if something is very sensitive, it will arrive, it will have like the right priority from the core of the network, and lots of applications that will leverage especially edge computing.
Right, I hear what you're saying. I think my sense is also that these 5G parks are going to create ecosystems that will spawn whole new startup lines that just, we can't even think about right now. But once the actual platform is built and people are using it, the creativity and the entrepreneurship that's going to come out of that is going to be quite strong.
Yeah, well, once you change the capacity to do things, then a lot of new opportunities. I'm also quite interested in all the new things that will happen, not directly related with 5G, but everything that will be enabled with the 5G technology.
Yeah.
The 5G you're going to have the possibility to do certain things are going to be critical, and that is something that sometimes is not directly correlated. But 5G is going to allow to have and collect way more quality data real time, and that will enable a lot of things that today are not possible. So those are products that will or services that will not happen in the 5G ecosystem in the edge that is now what a lot of people is looking at. But those will be possible because 5G enables this type of things.
Yeah. Andy, what do you see? What's coming out of the GBA right now in terms of the different sectors and spaces? What do you think would be most beneficial for cross-border financing?
The Greater Bay Area has always been very strong in electronics and hardware. So this is a space where people or adapt to the new normal. They will still require a lot of these electronic products, hardware, Internet of Things for their lives and work. So we believe that the sector, the Greater Bay Area has the experience, the infrastructure, and to produce and innovate on hardware and electronic goods. Will be in the place where the cross-border financing is going to help them for them to grow further and also purchase inventory.
Okay, good. Yeah, where do you think? What do you think startups should be thinking about in terms of getting in front of investors at this stage coming out of COVID? Oscar, what do you think that this sort of should be highest on their priority list?
Well, right now, something that is very important is that, as we were discussing earlier, there's going to be companies that are going to suffer a lot. There's going to be companies that are going to benefit, and then companies that are going to be in the middle. Investors are always looking for opportunities, but you want to make sure that you look for an opportunity that can benefit from their reality. So I think the first thing is that startups need to be able to reframe themselves and reposition themselves so they can become COVID beneficiaries or beneficiaries from the new situation. That's the first thing. That's from a concept perspective, that is very important. The second thing is, I think we were talking earlier that venture capital is going to be something that is probably going to be difficult to predict compared to other moments. So business plans that are more sustainable, companies that have plans of growth that are more sustainable, that have a strong validation on the unit economics. Those are companies that will be able to benefit a lot also from getting access. So those two elements are very, very important. Then, of course, this is generic advice to any company, and there's always going to be exceptions, no? Particularly depending on what type of area you're looking at. So obviously, there are areas right now that are massive problems that require massive solutions. So anything in the COVID specific, the treatment or the support of the space, it is receiving a lot of attention. This is already expanding to other areas where you can see side effects. For example, I think right now a lot of people is realizing that besides the physical effects of on health, the mental health impact of COVID is very important, and there's also a lot of initiatives in this side. So those are areas that you need to consider. Then we're also looking into a third group of category of companies that you might say that they're neutral, but in terms of COVID, but the situation has created a very different landscape, and that landscape makes potentially right now the best moment to start. So there are areas of companies where certain resources are very difficult to get access to, and you know that the go-to-market for these companies is going to be slow. Those companies will be working on product. A lot of deep tech companies, they will be working on product for some time, and that product, it doesn't matter if the market today cannot accept it, because the product is not going to be ready for the market. Well, those companies today can get access to a lot of resources in a cheaper way. There's more talent available. There's more willingness to change, to reduce change in certain areas. So those companies can get access to facilities, human resources, talent, even sometimes collaborations in an easier way. So the cost of taking those companies to market and to work on those products, it's going to be now more competitive than it could be in a market where everything is growing.
Yeah, true. So a bit more of a buyer's market than a seller's, would you say?
Yeah, well, it is exactly. Well, that happens also in other industries, no? In other areas where the customer acquisition cost is lower right now because less companies are promoting. But particularly in this case, the buyer side where you're looking for engineering talent is going to be in a benefit of the buyer that is looking for this talent.
Yeah. I also think that there's something to be said now for the physical infrastructure that's going to come out of the GBA in the next few years. I mean, it's quite astonishing to look at their plans for the high-speed railway network and realize how it's going to change the dynamics of the region. So I assume you were previously going to Shenzhen quite often then?
Yeah, I go to Shenzhen and Hong Kong pretty often, so several times a year.
You know the high-speed rail link, obviously, going to Shenzhen, right? So I've been looking quite carefully at the longer-term plans for the railway network, and it's astonishing to see that they've got plans for a high-speed link from Shenzhen going under the bay all the way across to Zhuhai, which is probably going to come to fruition in about 4 or 5 years. I mean, you can imagine once that is in, and now you've got the whole western side of the bay, a 30-minute journey away from Shenzhen, what that's going to mean in terms of, movement of people and the services and the products that are going to be generated by having that cluster of people within Easy Beach. Andy, I think it probably says more about the future for cross-border financing, that we have this kind of infrastructure coming into play now, right? Because when people are crossing borders physically, and hopefully we're going to get back to that in the not too distant future. Once people are crossing borders more often physically, it's just that much easier to facilitate the flow of capital. As well. Would you agree? I mean, what are you looking at in terms of the development of financial infrastructure in the Greater Bay Area in the coming years?
As we said before, there's now the opening of wealth management programs from Hong Kong being able to be sold to mainland consumers and vice versa, mainly Hong Kong consumers purchasing mainland wealth management products. This initiative is just the beginning, and you see that there's going to be more and more flow of people, but not only the flow of people, but there's going to be the flow of ideas as well, right? So that is going to give us opportunities and other finances opportunities to sell financial products within the Greater Bay Area, but also outside.
How do you see the growth outlook for your company and the space that you're in, particularly in the coming years?
Oh, we're focused on helping export e-commerce merchants. So a lot of them are exporting to the Europe, North America, Japan, Southeast Asia. So we're quite integrated in terms of the global economy. So with consumer confidence and unemployment improves from here, or stays flat or deteriorates, that's something that we monitor closely, and is something that may change our strategy in the future.
Sure. When you say cross-border e-commerce, you're talking about mom and pops kind of companies that are trading across border, or you're talking about more traditional e-commerce players?
We're talking about merchants selling on Wish, Amazon, eBay, Rakuten. So these are merchants doing between $1 to $2 million US, all the way up to $30 million US annually. So we consider them small, medium enterprises and middle market companies.
It's been quite fascinating to see the changes in the way that three cities in particular, Shenzhen, Dongguan, and Guangzhou, have been promoting cross-border e-commerce. I mean, they're all talking about being, regional centers for live streaming industries now, because they realize the power of these online, what they call them, KOLs, the key opinion leaders, right? I see Alibaba is putting a huge amount of money into Dongguan in building an ecosystem there for small and medium enterprises. Do you see the future being much more in small and medium enterprises? Is that where we're going with e-commerce?
Yeah, the world's moving from a B2B model to a B2C model, and even eventually to a C2C model. So, the internet and 5G technology and all these factors are accelerating and democratizing the access to consumers, and also the access from consumers to brands and products. So we believe that in the future, small to small trading is going to take off and really take over the traditional large to large or large to small trading.
It brings us to the last question that I had, which is, what kind of tools and skills do startups really need to be looking at and focused on acquiring in order to best scale up in the Greater Bay Area? Oscar, what do you think about that? What should people be looking at building themselves with right now?
Well, I think that obviously one of the key things is to scale out. You need to be able to grow. So, I mean, it is at least for a startup in the space that we look, which is mostly technology companies. It's not about a small operation in a region. It's really about a global business or about a big market. So this capacity to prove something local, but build an internationally minded team and a culture that can expand to other markets, it's critical. Because I mean, startup at the beginning, when it's growing, it's very easy to adapt, and culture is very simple. But once to maintain, but once the company scales, when you reach your first 15, 20 employees, you're already setting a culture and a way to operate the company. So if you think like a local business, like a very regional business, that will limit your capacity to scale globally and to bring in more people that can benefit from that. Okay, and that is like, okay, you need to scale. Second thing is, well, GBA area obviously has a strong locally, like day-to-day business has a strong like performance in certain areas, and this is where you can find some opportunities to what we call nail it, so you can scale it. So everybody thinks about startups as something super scalable, and that is obviously very important. You need to build that something that can scale, but you also need to be able to solve a problem that is very relevant and very specific to somebody that you ideally somebody you can have access to, somebody that you can get to interact, not just in a very remote way, in a very distant way through ads, but somebody that you can have a more deeper type of conversation and understanding, so you can finally discover what makes the current options in the market not good enough. So having this balance is very important, and that's where you see a lot of cases of not only startups coming from large markets like China, US, but also have small markets that are able to create these very big startups, because they think global from day zero, but they always start by working on a very regional, local problem.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Good advice. Andy, would you have any advice to give people in the startup space about how to get themselves the kind of skills that they need to grow quickly in the GBA?
Yeah, I'd like to remind everyone about what Oscar said before. The unit economics is very important, especially in this time. So investors will definitely want to see and approach and work with companies that are having very solid unit economics, and they can see that these companies can get to profitability in a reasonable time frame. So yeah, I believe that is important. And then secondly is flexibility and being more willing now than ever to try new things, and making sure that the innovation continues, and not to be deterred by the change that's constantly going on in the world right now.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, guys. Unless there's anything else specific you'd like to cover here, I think we can sort of do a summary of this. I think we're in agreement that the Greater Bay Area is probably one of the regions in the world that's going to recover quickest from coronavirus, and has an incredibly exciting potential future ahead of it, especially with the investments that are going into the tech space, the dedication of the government to facilitating this growth, and just the all-round reforms that are coming through here that are enabling a new kind of kinetic energy to come into the sector. It's not going to be necessarily easy for everybody, though. There's going to be a lot of disruption along the way. But it's in that disruption that, the typical startup community can flourish, right? Can look at finding new ways to do things that generate a new wave of economic growth in the region. Before we go, though, I'd like to just ask both of you to talk about how people who are watching us could connect with you after the event, and what kind of details they would need to provide to you. So, Andy, how does somebody connect with you after this if they want to follow up?
Yeah, they can collect by LinkedIn. Just search and Qupital. The first result over there.
Okay, Oscar.
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to connect. So if you look for Oscar Ramos in chinaccelerator, I'm the only one. So okay. It's easy to identify, and then easy to analyze people in context. It's actually, I actually like if people can say something, not just use the default message on there, so they can say they're interested in connecting, and they can put some context. I saw your talk here, or I'd like to talk about this. That really helps a lot.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both very much for your time. This has been a very enlightening conversation for me. And I'm sure if anybody else is going to be watching here, and I look forward to connecting with you again. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Anthony.
You guys.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you.